So, before we even get into the crisis, we need to establish what Greenland is, politically speaking. Because that relationship, that structure, is at the very center of this whole dispute.
Okay.
Greenland is technically a self-governing country, but it's within the larger framework of the Kingdom of Denmark.
So it's not just a Danish province or something like that.
Absolutely not. It has a majority Inuit population, about 56,000 people, and they have significant autonomy. I mean, they manage their own domestic affairs, education, healthcare,
Cultural resources.
and critically natural resource development. But, and this is the key thing, the constitutional arrangement reserves control over foreign policy, defense, and security policy to Copenhagen, to Denmark.
So that dual governance is the exact friction point here.
It's the precise point.
Yeah.
Because the U.S. is trying to bypass Denmark by appealing directly to Greenland, and then sometimes the other way around. It really depends on which political faction the U.S. is talking at any given moment.
That sounds incredibly complicated. So if Greenland is so self-governing, why hasn't it just, voted for full independence?
Well, they're on a path toward it, a slow but steady one. But true independence would mean losing this crucial annual financial block grant from Denmark.
Which funds most of their government, I'd imagine.
A significant portion of it, yeah. That funding provides stability, especially as they try to build the infrastructure they'd need to actually leverage those natural resources we're about to talk about. Denmark is still their security umbrella and their financial lifeline.
Okay, so speaking of which, why? Why has this vast, sparsely populated land, 80% covered in ice, suddenly become the most fiercely coveted piece of real estate on the planet?
The sources really point to three enormous, interconnected strategic pillars that are driving this whole U.S. acquisition effort.
Okay, what's pillar number one?
Pillar number one is Arctic geography. And this is, fundamentally driven by climate change. As the Earth warms, the ice sheet is receding at an unprecedented pace.
And this isn't just about melting glaciers, right? This is opening up new shipping routes.
Exactly. Previously inaccessible Arctic shipping routes that could fundamentally shorten the distance between Europe, North America, and Asia.
Wow.
Greenland's location puts it right at the geographical pinch point for any future large-scale trans-Arctic shipping. So whoever controls it has immense logistical leverage. It's a total game changer for maritime power, and it's happening right now.
Okay, so that's geography. What's the second pillar?
The second is military positioning. And the U.S. already has a significant presence there. It's not new. We're talking about the Fatufik Space Base.
Which, most of our listeners will probably know better as Thule Air Base. It's that crucial early warning system in the Northwest.
Thule, exactly. And this is where the nuance of the existing arrangement really matters. The U.S. presence there is covered by a 1951 defense agreement with Denmark.
Okay.
And that agreement already allows the U.S. to set up additional defense areas on the island if it's necessary for the mutual defense of North America.
So that begs the question then, doesn't it? If the U.S. already has military access rights and an established base under an allied treaty, why is the full acquisition of sovereignty suddenly an absolute necessity?
That is the critical question. And the sources suggest the answer might lie very heavily in the third pillar.
Which is natural resources.
That's the economic engine of this crisis. Geological surveys strongly suggest Greenland holds these vast, untapped mineral reserves. A 2023 survey was particularly compelling. It indicated Greenland contains 25 of the 34 minerals that the EU deems critical raw materials.
25 out of 34. That's a staggering amount of strategic wealth. What kind of materials are we actually talking about?
We're talking rare earths, which are essential for everything from your smartphone to electric vehicle batteries and sophisticated defense systems. We're talking zinc, iron, lead, and crucially, uranium.
Things the West currently relies on competitors like China to supply.
Precisely. Securing these reserves would give Western supply chains massive strategic autonomy. Then you add to that the potential for significant offshore oil and gas deposits, and you realize this isn't just an ice sheet. It's a continental vault of future economic power.
I can see the prize clearly now. But the sources all mention this huge caveat. It's the difficulty of actually getting to it, the extraction.
Exactly. The gold mine is there, but the key is locked, and the lock is extremely complex. Extraction is brutally challenging. You have the harsh Arctic environment, the remoteness, a severe lack of infrastructure.
And just the extraordinary costs involved.
The costs, absolutely. And on top of all that, and maybe most importantly, there is deep and vocal opposition from the local Inuit population to any large-scale, environmentally damaging resource development.
So it's not a quick cash grab.
Yeah.
Not at all. It requires a massive, long-term geopolitical and financial commitment.
Right, and this really explains why the U.S. acquisition campaign, which has been proposed before, has intensified so dramatically under the current administration.
Yeah, the idea of buying Greenland goes way back, right, to
Yeah.
the 1860s, and more recently in 2019, when President Trump first floated it.
Right, which caused such a diplomatic row that he canceled a state visit to Denmark. But in late 2024, the idea shifted. It went from being this strange historical proposal to an aggressive, urgent policy priority.
President Trump reiterated his interest in December 2024, and he described ownership as an absolute necessity for U.S. national security. The stated reason was to stop China or Russia from getting a foothold there.
But the rhetoric quickly became far more provocative than just, making a fair offer.
Much more. He refused to rule out using economic or military force. The public threat was to take Greenland one way or the other. Either, this is a quote, the nice way or the more difficult way.
And that phrase, the difficult way, that immediately signaled a willingness to breach diplomatic norms, maybe even international law, against a long-standing ally.
That rhetoric just instantly escalated the crisis from a dispute to a genuine threat. But the campaign wasn't just talk from the White House. The sources detail these specific coordinated acts of political and cultural influence. It was a pressure campaign on multiple fronts.
Yeah, we saw the deployment of these high-profile and, frankly, highly aggressive envoys.
Yep.
Take Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Starting in January 2025, he consistently said that controlling Greenland was critical for U.S. national security. He kept suggesting there was a deal to be made.
But the real diplomatic flashpoint was his uninvited visit in March 2025, wasn't it?
Yes. Vance just showed up in Greenland for a one-day visit that was not coordinated through official channels with Copenhagen. It was a clear attempt to engage with Greenland directly, bypassing Denmark's authority over foreign affairs.
And how did that go down?
It was immediately and unequivocally condemned by both the Greenlandic government and the Danish government as completely inappropriate interference.
And the unofficial outreach was just as provocative. It felt like it was blurring the lines between diplomacy and propaganda. I remember seeing these stories.
Oh, absolutely. In January 2025, you had Donald Trump Jr. and Charlie Kirk visiting Nuuk, the capital, and reports confirmed they were just handing out Meiji hats to locals.
Like political merchandise.
Political merchandise. Then soon after, the YouTube group, the Nelk Boys, also visited, and they were handing out US dollar bills to residents. A Greenlandic lawmaker criticized these as purely staged influence operations. This isn't diplomacy. It's soft power backed by political intent.
It seems incredibly tone-deaf and condescending, especially in a country with a proud indigenous majority.
It absolutely is. And then the official interference really culminated in December 2025 when Trump appointed Jeff Landry as special envoy to Greenland. And Landry openly said his mission was to work to make Greenland part of the U.S.
Okay, that must have been the last straw for Denmark.
It was. The Danish Foreign Ministry responded swiftly and furiously. They condemned the move as completely unacceptable interference.
And they summoned the U.S. ambassador, right?
Right.
Which is a serious diplomatic step.
A very serious rebuke. They insisted that everyone, including the U.S., must show respect for the territorial integrity of the Kingdom of Denmark. The message was crystal clear. Stay in your lane.
And this is where the internal coercion by the U.S. government becomes really clear, and it's deeply alarming for the alliance. I'm talking about the firing of Commander Susanna Myers, the U.S. military commander at Patuxent Space Base, in April 2025.
Yes, and the specific reason cited was her decision to actively distance the U.S. military base and its personnel from Vance's controversial visit and from Trump's overall rhetoric threatening Greenland.
Wait a minute. So the commander was trying to maintain good diplomatic relations with her host country, which is Denmark and Greenland, and upholding the terms of the 1951 agreement.
Correct.
And she was fired for it. Doesn't that signal that the White House is prioritizing its acquisition goal over military cohesion? I mean, potentially jeopardizing the operational effectiveness of its own base?
That is precisely the implication that analysts identified. It sent a chilling internal message. Dissent will be punished, even if that dissent is rooted in traditional military and diplomatic prudence. It showed the political imperative to get Greenland overrode everything else.
And that must have just shattered military trust between Washington and Copenhagen.
Fundamentally undermined it, yeah.
What's fascinating here is that despite this massive, multifaceted pressure campaign. You've got presidential threats, political envoys, influence ops. The response from Greenlanders and Danes has been almost unanimously unified.
A firm rejection of the whole thing. The rejection has been absolutely unequivocal, which directly undermines the whole U.S. argument that Greenlanders secretly want to join them.
What are they saying specifically?
Greenland's Prime Minister Mute Ajad stated plainly that Greenland is for the Greenlandic people, and the consensus phrase you hear over and over is, Greenland is not for sale.
And we have numbers to back this up, which makes the whole U.S. political campaign look completely disconnected from reality.
We do. A poll from January 2025 showed overwhelming public opposition. 85% of Greenlanders opposed joining the U.S. 85%.
And how many were in favor?
Only 6%. Just 6. It directly contradicts the U.S. president's claim that Greenland's residents want to be with us.
That's a massive disconnect.
And then the current head of government, Jens Fredrik Nielsen, he cemented this position in January 2026 with this powerful statement of alliance solidarity. He said, and I'm quoting here, "If we have to choose between the U.S. and Denmark here and now, we choose Denmark, NATO, and the EU."
Wow. So instead of driving Greenland toward the U.S., the threats are actually pushing them closer to Denmark and Europe.
It's the diplomatic opposite of the desired effect. Completely backfired.
And this isn't just high-level politics, is it? For the 56,000 residents, this standoff is deeply personal. Let's slow down and look at the sources on the human cost here. Residents were expressing profound anxiety.
Deep anxiety and fear on the ground. It completely disrupted their sense of security. People in Greenland have historically seen themselves as living in one of the safest places on Earth.
Right.
A resident named Najanwak Hegland said she used to joke that Greenland was the ultimate safe haven. And now she says that assurance is suddenly no longer true. That feeling of being safe from global politics just vanished overnight.
And the fears they were voicing, they weren't just vague anxieties, they were specific, practical concerns about what annexation could mean for their society.
Indeed. Locals were asking questions like, are we going to have to pay for our studies? You know, a clear reference to the U.S. system of higher education debt versus the Danish system of free education.
And others voiced an even more jarring question.
They did. Are there going to be soldiers here shooting Greenlandic people?
That fear of U.S. soldiers doing bad stuff to them, we can't just gloss over that. The sources really emphasize that this distrust is deeply rooted in Greenland's own painful colonial history.
Absolutely. You have to connect the dots back to their past experiences under Danish administration. I mean, the sources remind us of the recent legal victory by 143 women who were forcibly fitted with IUDs by Danish doctors when they were young.
Without their consent or knowledge.
Without their consent or knowledge, that systemic colonial abuse created a deep, painful scar of distrust. So when a resident asks if American soldiers will be shooting Greenlandic people, that fear is not abstract. It's a reflection of historical trauma.
And the fear of a new, potentially more aggressive colonial power replacing the old one.
Exactly. It also caused internal social friction. An artist named Avia Corneliusen noted how sad the change in their community was. She said before the U.S. claims, life was easy. People had no worries. They were friends with everybody.
And now?
Now the pressure and the threats are dividing Greenlandic society. The geopolitical threat has become a force of societal fragmentation.
Meanwhile, Denmark is in this completely untenable position, forced to pivot from being a friendly NATO partner to a firm defender of its territory against that same partner.
The Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has had to constantly stress the inviolability of international law, explicitly declaring that borders cannot be changed by force.
And this has led to some major concrete security consequences.
It has. In 2025, the Danish Defense Intelligence Service, the DID, took the unprecedented step of classifying the United States as a security threat.
That is seismic. I mean, we're talking about a founding NATO member classifying the alliance's cornerstone nation as a threat. What does that even mean, practically?
It means that, internally, U.S. intentions are now viewed through the same lens as Russian or Chinese aggression. It mandates shifts in defense budgeting, intelligence protocols, internal security. It's a fundamental and profound shift in their strategic thought.
Acknowledging that the biggest threat to their sovereignty might not be an external adversary, but an unreliable ally.
Exactly. And the defense posturing became very severe, very real. In January 2026, Denmark publicly confirmed that Danish soldiers deployed to Greenland would shoot back if invaded.
That removes all ambiguity. It's a declaration of war readiness against a treaty partner.
It forces the world to confront the reality that two NATO allies are openly discussing military conflict over sovereign territory. This is not how Article 5 is supposed to work.
So Denmark and Greenland unified their diplomatic front and started looking to Europe for support.
Yes, essentially using the EU as a counterweight to U.S. aggression. The stakes couldn't be clearer.
As this whole thing escalated, commentators and academics began applying a very specific term to what the U.S. was doing: hybrid warfare.
Right. This campaign, with its influence operations, its economic coercion, its political pressure, it was described as uniquely unsettling and very difficult for an ally to counter.
Okay, let's pause and define that term clearly. Because hybrid warfare is usually something we talk about with adversaries, like Russia against Ukraine. If the U.S. isn't firing missiles, why is this called warfare?
That's the key distinction. Hybrid warfare uses non-military means to achieve strategic objectives. It aims to destabilize an opponent below the threshold of declared war. The warfare part comes from the deliberate application of pressure to damage Denmark's sovereignty, its internal unity, its political will to resist.
So, targeting Denmark with tariff threats, or firing a U.S. military commander who shows loyalty to the host nation, that's a sophisticated act of destabilization disguised as diplomacy.
Yes, and because it comes from an ally, it's deeply unsettling. Allies rely on trust and predictable rules. When those rules are ignored, the target country, Denmark, has difficulty responding. The rules for dealing with a hostile adversary just don't apply to an ally.
And the rhetoric from Washington only reinforced this, right?
Oh, yeah.
White House officials asserting the U.S. had the right to take Greenland.
And we heard the press secretary state that the military is always an option, an overt threat of force against a NATO member.
Yeah, it kept escalating.
It did. In January 2026, right after U.S. strikes in Venezuela, White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller stated publicly that the U.S. had the right to seize Greenland. And then his wife, Katie Miller, posted a map of Greenland draped in a U.S. flag with just one word: soon.
That OP use of coercive imagery is chilling.
It's a frightening feature of this hybrid campaign, and some of that rhetoric, as the AI analysis helped us uncover, it dipped into extremist territory.
You're talking about the meme. When J.D. Vance and Marco Rubio met with the Danish and Greenlandic foreign ministers, the White House posted a meme asking which way Greenland man.
Yes, and we need to address the findings here head-on. That imagery, the Greenland man, was quickly identified by analysts as knowingly nodding to a far-right white supremacist subculture.
Why is that phrase so provocative? What's the code?
In those subcultures, the phrase Western man is recognized code for white man, and the meme itself referenced imagery from a popular racist book within those circles. For the White House to deploy imagery with such identifiable far-right undertones in a diplomatic context,
Especially targeting a nation with a majority indigenous population.
it's an extreme escalation. It weaponizes cultural and racial politics to exert pressure. It's an attack not just on Denmark's territory, but on global norms of allied behavior and basic respect.
This blending of official pressure with unofficial propaganda and extremist dog whistles, it's insidious. And it brings us to the most existential question. What does a NATO ally threatening another NATO ally mean for the alliance itself?
And the answer, delivered starkly by the Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, is terrifying. She warned that if the U.S. were to attack another NATO country militarily, it would mean the end of NATO.
It would fundamentally invalidate the entire reason the alliance exists.
Exactly. NATO's foundation is Article 5, collective defense against outside threats. The framework is just not designed for one member using military force against another, especially not a founding member like Denmark.
If Article 5 is revealed to be conditional on political whims in Washington, the entire security guarantee is worthless.
Which is why analysts are calling this an existential crisis for the alliance.
And the alarm bells were clearly ringing inside Washington, too.
Oh, yeah. Sources show significant bipartisan alarm. Republican senators, including Mitch McConnell, warned explicitly that seizing Greenland would incinerate NATO alliances. They saw immediately that it would destroy decades of trust.
And this alarm translated into actual congressional action?
Yes. Bipartisan legislative efforts, including bills like the No Invading Allies Act. The purpose was explicit: to block U.S. military funds for any offensive action against a NATO ally. This is an unprecedented level of internal resistance.
It shows Congress views the White House's threats as a dangerous, credible, and potentially catastrophic risk.
It does, and the core lesson here for European partners is clear. Any sign of U.S. political volatility fundamentally undermines the reliability of the alliance.
And that loss of dependability is the driving force behind renewed calls in Europe for strategic autonomy.
You're seeing renewed discussions about a European army or deepening defense cooperation outside of NATO. It's a mechanism for preparing for a future where the Article 5 guarantee is no longer considered ironclad. They're creating a Plan B.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We're moving from geopolitical drama to quantitative analysis. We have the data on the measurable impact of this crisis thanks to a fascinating study that used AI to track the real-time decline of trust in NATO.
This study is a perfect example of using modern machine learning for political analysis. They used the advanced GPT 4.1 model combined with something called RAG retrieval augmented generation technology.
Can you explain RAG technology simply for us? Because that sounds highly technical.
Of course. Think of the base AI model, GPT 4.1, as a brilliant but sometimes imaginative analyst. RAG is the system that forces that analyst to show its work and only reference a verified library of documents. So instead of the AI guessing, it's synthesizing vast amounts of real-world data, news articles, transcripts, social media, and generating scores based strictly on the sentiment in that data.
So it adds reliability. And what did this AI analysis generate?
It generated quantitative scores from -5 to +5 across 3 critical metrics: overall sentiment toward NATO, NATO unity, and most importantly, trust in Article 5.
And when you look at the mean scores over those 4 years, the data tells a very clear, very alarming story. The scores for unity, sentiment, and Article 5 trust all showed a continuous, undeniable downward trend.
And the sources point out that this decline accelerated sharply right into early 2025, which of course is exactly when the aggressive U.S. rhetoric against Greenland ramped up.
Let's focus on Article 5 trust, because that's the bedrock of the whole alliance. An attack on one is an attack on all.
That automatic commitment. The score got a temporary boost in 2022 after the Ukraine invasion, as allies rallied, but that confidence quickly dissipated. As the U.S. political climate shifted toward transactional rhetoric epitomized by the threats against Denmark, the AI shows trust scores plummeting from a positive range down to -2, even -4.
That's a huge swing from conditional optimism to deep negativity. The analysis says it's moving from cautious optimism to genuine apprehension and alarm.
And this data proves that the perception of political volatility is actively eroding NATO's greatest strategic asset, its dependability. If partners can't trust the U.S. commitment, they start making separate plans, and that damages the unity of the entire framework.
We can also look at the data sliced by source type, which gives even more nuance. The study specifically tracked major U.S. news organizations, CNN, NBC, the New York Times, and Fox News.
Yeah, figure 3 in the study is striking. It shows that regardless of ideology, the trend lines for unity and Article 5 trust are all heading in the same direction downwards from 2023 through 2025. This isn't confined to one media bubble. The threat to NATO credibility is recognized across the entire U.S. political landscape.
Now, if we look at social media, the YouTube video and comment analysis, we see what the source material calls an interesting disconnect.
We do. The box plots in Figure 4 show the mean scores for comments are generally lower and far more cynical than the scores for the videos themselves. The professional analysis in the videos might express caution, but the public opinion in the comments is far more decisive in its negativity.
So the comments section, reflecting more immediate public sentiment, reveals deep anxiety about U.S. commitments.
Exactly. The analysis found users in the comments were much more likely to reference historical betrayals or express deep skepticism about whether the West would actually defend Eastern European allies if the U.S. commitment was now conditional on the outcome of a land grab in Greenland. The skepticism is raw and decentralized.
So the AI analysis of all these sources found that U.S. reliability is the central axis of the entire alliance's credibility.
Any sign of U.S. volatility, especially aggression against an ally, undermines trust at all levels. And that grassroots skepticism often exceeds the caution expressed by professional analysts. The data provides empirical evidence that doubts are mounting. It's a measured crisis of confidence.
So what does this all mean when we bring these themes together? We've traced a geopolitical dispute over Greenland, driven by the pursuit of valuable resources and military positioning made newly accessible by climate change.
And this aggressive pursuit, framed by the U.S. as a national security imperative, has generated a cascade of negative consequences. It's created palpable fear in Greenland, pushed them closer to Denmark, and triggered an unprecedented diplomatic backlash across Europe.
And most significantly, this campaign against an ally has served as the catalyst for a measurable, quantifiable decline in trust and credibility for NATO. The AI data proves that the sense of unity and the core trust in Article 5 has sharply eroded.
The alliance remains resilient in its military capacity, its operational structure. The joint exercises still happen. But the political will, and crucially the credibility of the alliance, which is centered entirely on that automatic, dependable guarantee in Article 5, are undergoing their most acute test.
And we leave you with this final provocative thought for the learner. The demand for Greenland is often framed around securing mineral wealth now accessible because of climate change. The melting ice is exposing the riches.
But some sources warn that the same warming temperatures that are revealing those resources are also causing rapid ice melt, volatile sea ice, and other extreme weather that could severely disrupt the major development efforts needed to extract those resources in the first place.
So if global warming simultaneously makes Greenland desirable for its resources,
And yet technologically hostile, unpredictable, and prohibitively expensive for extraction, does that fundamentally change the long-term economic value proposition that is currently fueling this global crisis?
is the prize worth destroying the alliance structure built to defend it?
Something to think about.
Something to mull over as the ice continues to melt and global alliances are tested. We'll be back next time for another deep dive.